Welcome one and all. It's time to discuss financial ruin brought about by an excess of dwarf purchases. Is that something that happened? Well, I'm pretty sure many people out there are feeling the financial pinch of those beards in their basket on the pre-order day. So let's go through my personal adventure. But wait a minute, I hear you ask, aren't you normally out playing Warhammer every Thursday? And the answer to that would be normally yes, but I'm currently sitting at home because I'm recovering from a knee operation that I had yesterday. So no gaming for me this week. Just going to be shuffling around back and forth between the chair and the bed and whichever other parts of the house I need to reach at any given time. And yeah, so that was very exciting. Got stabbed with lots of needles. But what I've got to look forward to in life, other than having a fully recovered knee after a week or so, is the impending arrival of some dwarves. So there I was on pre-order day, all ready to roll, and what was my strategy? Well, I had the GW page open, ready to refresh. I also had a third-party retail page open as well, because some of them have nice discounts on the certain core products that are carried across all the different retailers, but there are quite a few that are direct from GW only, or if the third-party retailers do have them, then they don't have any discount on them, because they have to order them direct or something. So I had Element Games open for my third party of choice, hoping to get whichever core products that I wanted from there, up to the free postage threshold, and then anything else from GW. So, I'll go through them entry by entry and tell you what I was looking for, what I didn't want, and what I missed out on. There's at least one item that I wanted but wasn't able to get in time, despite being there dead on pre-order time, and some sneaky strategies that people came up with in order to get there ahead of everyone else. So, Dwarf Hammerers, nope, don't need any, got a full unit. I know they also make Longbeards who are good, but I'd rather wait and see if the metal Longbeards come back, so that's a no. Dwarf Lord on Shield Bearers. So that was one of the core products that was available on Element Games website, so that went straight in my Element Games basket, one of those. Was able to secure that. Iron Breakers and Iron Drakes, don't really need any more of those right now. Same for Warriors. Bugman's Cart. Now, this is now sold out, as is the Lord on Shield Bearers, by the way. So, Bugman's Cart, that went straight into my GW basket, as did the Slayers and the Imperial Dwarves. The Imperial Dwarves were limited to one per customer, which is interesting. So they're not actually sold out. That's probably why, because if someone could buy 10 sets of them, I'm sure they would have done, even at those prices, because that's probably still cheaper than you'd be paying on eBay for these kind of miniatures of that age. So desperately need Slayers for my dwarf army, and a big old chunk of Slayers in there. Then the battalion, don't really need that. I just bought gyrocopters recently. I don't need any of the basic dwarves. I've got loads of them. Goblin Hewer went straight into the GW cart. Don't need Quarrelers. I've left out the Doom Seekers for now. So another thing that was nagging at me was, do I leave a couple of items out and go and try and pick them up from Warhammer World? Because the online-only stuff is often on sale there. Do I leave a couple of things out and then maybe around release time go in and try and pick something up there? And maybe I'll even get a collectible dwarf-themed coin. Wouldn't that be a delight? Well, I mean, it would be nice, but I don't think it's that critical. But Doom Seekers were on my maybe pile, because I wasn't fully familiar with their rules yet, but they actually look pretty tasty now that I've seen them leaked all over the internet, because everyone and their dog apparently has the Arcane Journal in advance. So the Goblin Hewer went into the basket. Ungrim Iron Fist the Slayer King went into the basket as well. However, when I went to complete my order at the checkout, Ungrim Iron Fist was removed as being out of stock 2 minutes after the window opened for pre-orders. Interesting. So this is one of the few It is in resin, I think, so I don't know whether that means they've done less of them and they're just doing less resin items compared to everything else, or maybe he's just exceptionally popular. His rules look good, the model's very cool, and what I was told afterwards by at least one person was that you could actually find him by searching the website prior to the pre-order window opening. So the pages were all there and searchable, so you could go and get them ready, so that as soon as it opened you just immediately go to checkout and complete the purchase, rather than having to spend 60 seconds filling up the basket. So that's how some people got to steal the march on everyone else and were able to pick up Ungrim Iron Fist before he was immediately sold out. So I'm sure he'll be back sporadically and then sell out again, a bit like the Bretonian lady. I think she's also, is she in resin as well? Lady Duchard, or Lady Dutchard if you will. So it could be one of those situations where you just have to be lucky and happen to be online or in the right place when he's available. Anvil of Doom? Well, here's a funny thing. I don't really need an Anvil of Doom because I've already got one. But there has been some talk lately about people wanting to try the double anvil, which is definitely a viable tactic. And while I was looking through my bits drawer, I found, wait a minute, I've got this Bad Squiddo anvil right here. It's about the same size as an Anvil of Doom. I wonder if there are some Bad Squiddo dwarves I can put around it. So, the Kickstarter that I just backed from Bad Squiddo, there is actually a dwarf lady with a hammer, who looks like a perfect replacement for the Rune Master. So maybe like a Rune Mother. And then there are some standard dwarves in the Bad Squiddo range as well. So I'm going to have a Bad Squiddo anvil, in case I want to run two. Which I probably will do, just for the lols, at least once, to see if it's any good. So, didn't need an anvil. Dwarf Engineers. Yes. Engineers are pretty cool now, they've got all kinds of snazzy rules, so the Dwarf Engineer pack. And that price, even though it looks steep for 4 miniatures, if they were sold individually, you'd expect to pay a lot more than that, actually, because individual heroes usually go for... What's the lowest you'd see an individual hero for? Like £20 nowadays? So it seems like quite a good deal on that basis. We've got the Dwarven Mountain Holds dice set. So this was one of the items that I got on Element Games because it had a bit of a discount on it. And because I was a little bit below the free postage threshold on my Element Games order, I just added a second set of dice because they're going to sell out. So even if I decide I don't want to, they'll retain their value anyway and I'd be able to sell the other one. But I might want to. I might want to roll that many dice with the lovely dwarf iconography on there. And they are a very attractive colour. Imperial Dwarf Command, again, limited to one of those, so grabbed one of those. Thane with handgun on Oathstone. I did not go for that. I don't think it's entirely necessary. I have got a character on an Oathstone already. And I'm going to have all these engineers with guns and such, so I don't know if I need a Thane on an Oathstone with a handgun. Seemed a bit excessive, because there, look, one character you're paying £28 for. So engineers looking better value all the time here. Colonel Billington reckons I spent 0.03 Remcoin. Well, how much is that in normal currency? Because Remcoin value can fluctuate massively based on the market. Dwarven Holds transfer sheet. Okay, so I'm going to have a close-up of this one because I was looking over it and I thought, is there really any reason for me to have this? I don't have that many banners I could actually use the transfers on. I've got shields. Most of the shields I have already had an icon on them, so I wouldn't be able to hold a transfer anyway. The Bugman's shields would, but there's barely any of the big B rune that you would want, or the tankard. I don't think you get a Bugman's tankard on here. I can't see one. If anyone else can spot one, let me know. And the banners, I don't have many of those that I could use it for, and I've already hand painted one of the banners with this kind of symbol here, this mountainous area. So I don't feel like I really need an entire transfer sheet. Let's see, Close Order says, I never use them, but I do really like those transfers. Yep, I'll agree with you there. They're very nice transfers, but I don't know if the Dwarf range is the best at making use of that many transfers. Not like my Bretonnians, where I've got a million peasant shields, and all the knights have got shields to have transfers on as well. Matthew says, didn't realise the Imperial Dwarves were 1 per customer. That's doubly annoying, means you can't even buy a legal unit. Yes, so I'm going to have to get more Imperial Dwarves at a later date. Since Warhammer World is my local GW, then I'll be able to just drop in there shortly after release day and hopefully get some more, because they tend to have all the online-only stuff in there available sporadically. Then where are we? Okay, Arcane Journal, that went into my Element Games order, since that was slightly discounted as well, I think. So, going to be having that. And while we're on this topic, I've noticed some people are starting to get their orders already from the third-party retailers, because GW are saying that the order I've made with them isn't going to be for another week. But the Element Games order I placed is suggesting that it might arrive this weekend. Now, is that because these products, like the Arcane Journal and the Battalion and your basic plastic stuff, and the book and the dice, is all that stuff going out this weekend from everywhere, including GW, and then the metal and resin stuff is going out a week later? Does that sound right to anybody? So we shall see if my Element Games order turns up, which contains the King on Shield Bearers, the dice, and the Arcane Journal, so it'd be nice to get started on that early. The reference card pack, that went in my order as well. Even if I don't use it, it'll be cool to have it anyway. The Arcane Journal book didn't seem necessary. Let's see, Close Order says nothing should go out this week, but the 2-week pre-order GW have moved to has confused local game stores a lot. It seems that way because I've seen a lot of people on Facebook posting that they've received their dwarves already. And I'm looking at my Element Games order now, and it's still saying that it's expected to arrive this weekend. So that remains to be seen. We've got the Slayer command, which of course I had to add as well, since I've already got the Slayer unit added. So a nice full unit of Slayers there for use. Flame Cannon and Bolt Thrower were in my maybe pile. And they didn't make it into this basket, because I've already spent enough. But if in the future I would like another one of those. Another Bolt Thrower and a first Flame Cannon. I would have preferred if they'd brought back the even older classic Flame Cannon. Runesmith, don't need, I've already got 2 Runesmiths. Dwarf command set. Okay, is it deeply controversial to say that I'm not that keen on these miniatures? I don't know if they really fit the aesthetic of any era of the dwarves. This guy, I don't know what's wrong with it. Maybe the posture is just so thick, this guy. And I don't know if he really matches any of the other Slayers that have ever existed from GW. I've always had a slight issue with him. These two, a little bit more, a little bit better, but kind of unnecessary, and for that price I don't really need to spend that much on some characters when I've already got perfectly serviceable miniatures to play those parts. This was a popular set back in the day though, so I'm not surprised that it's sold out. Then Matthew says, my third-party order got dispatched yesterday. Yeah, so I don't know whether all the third-party retailers are just disobeying GW's rules, or whether they're just confused, or whether it is just the plastics and the non-online only stuff that is going out this week and everything else is going to be next week. Then, finally, the Grudge Thrower. A Grudge Thrower did make it into my order because I want to run a list that has 2. And I only have 1, and it's the older one than this. Although, the old one I have is actually incomplete because it was missing one of the beams, so I had to replace that with green stuff when I originally built it 12 years ago or so. So it'd be nice to have a second Grudge Thrower. So, let's have a look now at what is sold out, before I tell you my basket total and how much financial ruin I'm in. So, Lord on Shield Bearers, sold out, expectedly. None of the plastic individual units are sold out, which isn't that surprising because they've probably got billions of them. Because with plastic you want to do as many as possible. Bugman's Cart, not surprised it's sold out. That was always going to be popular. It's so old and it's charming. Slayers, and Imperial Dwarves. The Imperial Dwarves were limited to 1 per customer, so I can understand those not being sold out for that reason, because otherwise they would have been snaffled up by now. And maybe some people were put off even buying any of them because they couldn't get a big enough unit at release time, so they're going to wait till later when they can maybe get more at once. So that could be an issue there. Battalion not sold out, the plastics, as you'd expect. They don't have the individual gyrocopters for sale yet, so that's currently the way to get them. Slayers not sold out. Goblin Hewer, I'm surprised that's not sold out. That's been the one thing that whenever you ask Dwarf players what do they want to come back, because it was such a short-lived model, so people didn't get a chance to buy it back in the day. Same for the Doomseekers, I'm surprised they're not sold out as well. Quarrelers, again, plastics, so no surprise there. Ungrim Iron Fist, obviously, sold out in 2 minutes. Not that I'm at all irritated about that, even though it was one of the first things on my list that I immediately added to my basket, ploughed straight through to the checkout, hit complete order, and then this order cannot be completed. And then it kicked him out the basket. 2 minutes, can you believe it? Matthew says, sad no Slayer engineer, Malachi McKayson. Yes. There is one critical piece of the Goblin Hewer missing, but I suppose rather than making him a generic model, although they kind of have done that with the Anvil of Doom, haven't they? This is just the Anvil of Doom, it's not Thoric Ironbrow, the Anvil of Doom. And what's the other guy called? Was it Snorri? Something like that. His funny little friend there at the back. Can't remember what his name is. But they've just made them generic and got rid of the names. So I suppose they could have done, unless they thought that Malachi looked particularly distinct. Or maybe they're going to... Craggy, that's it. Little Craggy at the back. The Engineers not sold out. And I think I can understand, because it's a pack of 4 Engineers. People might be thinking, I don't need 4 Engineers. What madness is this? When am I ever going to field 4 Engineers? But obviously they haven't looked at the Engineers Expeditionary Force. Because I can definitely see a world where people are taking 4 Engineers. Maybe not long term, but certainly trying 4 Engineers in a list. Dwarvenhold dice set. Sold out online. So not surprising, the dice always sell out. They don't seem to make that many of them. But they do come back into stock sporadically. Imperial Dwarf Command. Again, it was limited, so not surprised that they're not sold out. Dwarf Thane with handgun on Oathstone. Is this a resin one? Let's have a look. Resin, there we go. So it's a common thing then. I think all the resin kits are immediately sold out. So it's him, and it's Ungrim Iron Fist. Is anything else in resin? What's the Goblin Hewer in? That's got to be metal, hasn't it? Let's have a look. What does it say? That must be in metal. Yeah, there we go, metal. So I think it is just those 2 in resin, and they've both sold out. But it is a nice model list, so for anyone that doesn't already have a load of cool individual heroes, I could see that one being popular. Transfer sheet, not surprised, because it's one of those things that you think when it's gone it might never come back, so people could jump straight on it. Arcane Journal, you kind of need it, so not surprising that would sell out. I'm sure that'll come back in though, unlike the transfers, which might not, you never know. The cards, definitely not surprised they sold out, because they tend not to reprint them, it seems. Any kind of cards, if you don't get them immediately, you're going to be paying obscene eBay reseller prices. So if you don't have the cards, it's bad luck. People can obviously just make their own. Slayer Command not sold out. I'm surprised the Slayers aren't sold out. Maybe they anticipated high demand and they made a lot of Slayers. Flame Cannon and Bolt Thrower not sold out. I can understand based on the rules that the Flame Cannon's not sold out, because it doesn't seem to be particularly enticing. The one War Machine that is sold out is the Grudge Thrower, and that's not surprising at all, because that seems to be pretty hot right now. Dwarf Command set, not surprised because it was popular back in the day, and I can understand the appeal, just not the Slayer. Don't like him. Plastic Runesmith, not surprised it's not sold out at all. People already have Runesmiths, and there have been some Runesmiths over the years that I think are nicer than this one. I think is the polite way to put it. So, let's see. Matthew says, probably because we spent the last 3 months assuming, fairly I think, that a Slayer army would be in the Arcane Journal. Well, you can field an entire Slayer army. Just to be clear. You can actually do that in the new book. It's not necessarily a very optimal build, but you can do it, because you can take Mr. Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King, which means you can then take a unit of Slayers as core. So you could fill core with a massive unit of Slayers. You can then take Doomseekers and the Goblin Hewer, and that's pretty much all you need. What else would you have to put in your list? You could take some individual Demon Slayers and Giant Slayers as well. Fill up your list that way. Are there any lists that are allowed to take more than one Goblin Hewer? I'm not sure. You can make Doomseekers quite expensive, actually, because you can ruin them up. And their rules are looking pretty spicy. When I get the book in my hand, I'm going to go through it properly on this channel and talk about it. But the Doomseekers have the weird ability that it pushes the fact that they really want to get killed. And I thought it would be cool if all Slayers have this rule, where your opponent is rewarded, kind of, if they're alive at the end of the game. If you kill them, you're giving them what they want, so you don't score any points for them. If they're alive at the end of the game, you've denied them a heroic death and you do score. So it's a really bizarre reverse scoring, and I can understand why you wouldn't want to put it on all the Slayers, because it could become horribly overpowered if you made a whole army that you couldn't score anything for killing, and it would be kind of a backward game where you would just be dodging, fighting all the dwarves, and trying to make it a non-event of a game. So it makes sense not giving it to the whole army. But it is cool and thematic, and maybe they didn't need to be so heavy-handed with the rule. It doesn't have to be that if they survive, then you score the victory points for them, and if you kill them, you don't score any victory points for them. They could have settled somewhere in the middle, I think, or maybe it could have been based on the unit that killed them, because they're supposed to be facing and taking on a heroic challenge and death. So maybe if you get them killed by something suitable, then you're rewarded with points that way. So I think they could have gone a bit more in-depth and a bit more nuanced with that rule, rather than the way they've applied it purely to the Doomseekers. They could be testing the water, maybe in future editions of the Dwarf rules for the Old World. Maybe they'll expand that to Slayers and tinker with it a bit, and maybe when they do a full Slayer army, they'll certainly have to. Because otherwise, if you're going to just widely apply that to all the Slayers and you let them take a full army, then the opposition could feasibly score nothing for wiping out your entire force, which seems very bizarre. So I would have liked to have seen it a bit more situational, the points denial, and the unit that you get them killed by rewarding you. What else? So what are we waiting for now? What don't we have yet? Well, we don't have the organ gun and cannon kit. We don't have the gyrocopters individually. We've only got them as part of the battalion. What else don't we have yet? We don't have the Dragon Company that were shown to us. We haven't seen those yet, so presumably they're going to be made to order. What else do we know is coming but we haven't seen yet? Nothing's jumping out. Oh yeah, miners. We don't have miners yet. And the miner kit does come with a pony cart as well. Not the Bugman's cart, but the miner's cart is a separate entry in the book. So that's going to be exciting, running those. Matthew says, some of the old metal lords and thanes as well as the metal runesmiths. Yes, we haven't seen any of those yet. I assume they'll be on made to order. The old classic runesmiths and thanes and lords. But what am I looking forward to the most from this lot? The Dwarf Lord with shield bearers is something that will significantly change my army, I think. Because he's just way more tanky, survivable than any of the other heroes you can make, because of the extra wounds. And just very cool. I think that'll be quite a difference maker to my list building. The Bugman's pony cart as well will change the list building in some ways also. Because you can then start looking at units that have a bit of speed to them, for a dwarf and get something right in front of the enemy early in the game. So that's going to be interesting. Slayers, obviously slightly different play style, but I'm going to have a look at the different upgrades you put on them before I speak too much on Slayers, so I'm going to wait for the book and then have a proper read through that. The Goblin Hewer is a decent ranged war machine that cuts through ranks of troops, so it's competing with the organ gun, I would say. It does a similar job. The organ gun is probably better against like your knights, whereas Goblin Hewer is much better against huge blocks of infantry, which we don't always see, but if you're against Tomb Kings, quite often you'll see a huge block of skeletons, so it could be very good in those situations. Matthew says, did you get the new plastic White Dwarf? I see a lot of people are intent on putting that model on shield bearers. I did not. I do have the White Dwarf issue 200 era White Dwarf. The one that's holding the two-handed axe in both hands, kind of up next to his head. So I'm going to paint that up as a Dwarf Lord or a Thane. So that's going to be exciting. I've also got the Dwarf from Warhammer Quest, which has been in my Dwarf army, but it's went through about 8 different layers of paint over the years. So I'm going to try and paint strip that and paint him up, because that's a really cool model, the old Warhammer Quest Dwarf. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to use all these Lords and Thanes in the same list, but it's nice to have them anyway, and since it is my original army, the Dwarves, it's the one I've had for the longest, I started it in the mid-90s, then I would like to eventually have everything, just to complete the collection, and just paint everything. And then obviously take very nice pictures of them and use them in games, so that if there's ever any freak accident that destroys the army, or I fall down some stairs with the army and they all fall into a sewer, then at least I've taken pictures of them and people have seen them out on the table, so they'll be preserved for all time. Doom Seekers, I'm definitely going to get some, I think, at some point, but they haven't been ordered yet. Alright then, I'm going to go over and look at my basket totals now. And I was also talking to Mr. Remington, and you may have seen the video that we did talking about what we were planning to order, and we were discussing that you could quite easily, if you wanted to order everything, end up at like £600 if you wanted enough to make full units. So, let's see. Well, Mr. Remington bought less than me, but I think he's nearly spent £200 on them. So, that should tell you the kind of ballpark we're in here. So, let's have a look at my baskets. So, Element Games, which contains the Arcane Journal, the Dwarf Lord on Shield Bearers, and 2 lots of dice, just to get it past the free postage threshold. If I decide I don't want to, they hold their value anyway, so I could just get rid of the second one if I decide I don't want that many. So that's £82. And then in the GW basket, which does not contain, where is he? This guy, Mr. Ungrim Ironfist, because he was sold out in 2 minutes, if you missed me ranting about that earlier. So we've got the Imperial Dwarves, we've got the Grudge Thrower, the Dwarf Engineers, the Dwarf Slayers, the Dwarven Mountain Holds reference card pack, Bugman's Cart, the Goblin Hewer, Dwarf Slayer's Command, and the Imperial Dwarf Command. So that is a lot of stuff, and that comes to a grand total of £303. So that is a significant investment into an army that I already own. But I've been putting off spending any frivolous money over the last few months. And also, important note, the way I get paid at work, I get paid every 4 weeks, not every month. So every year or so, it rolls over, so there's a payment that no bills get taken out of. So last time, I spent that on a new PC, because it feels like free money, because no bills are directly coming out of it. And I haven't spent it on anything extravagant this year, but I have now spent a good chunk on this dwarf. It's almost an army in itself. And I can see lots of fun in the future, trying out all the different combos. Got 3 different kinds of dwarven army to run now. The 2 armies in the Arcane Journal and the standard one. So many different units to try out in each one. Some of them you have to have taken a certain army to use them. For example, the new Scout Gyrocopters, I think they're only in the Engineering army. But I'm playing so many games, I'll be able to make use of all of them, I think. And eventually mixing them in with my Bretonnian army as well. And by that I mean not mixing them together in an army, necessarily, but sometimes playing the Dwarves, sometimes playing the Bretonnians, should add some variety. But the fact that there are 3 different kinds of Dwarven army now is going to add variety not only to my gaming but also to the battle reports, because there's some totally different playstyles you can achieve with this now. It's going to be very exciting, and hopefully everyone else is as hyped as I am for the beards. And before I wrap this one up, would anyone like to let me know if they spent a vast amount of money on dwarves? Look at all this stuff. These guys. I did have some slayers. I had some of these back in the day. I'm not sold on this orange hair but natural beard though. So I'm definitely going to be doing mine the way I've done my one slayer that I already have, which is the Battle for Skull Pass slayer, Alric Big Butts, who I sculpted extra large butt cheeks onto. And I've got half of his hair and beard orange and the other half green. So I'm going to do mine half orange and half another colour. So probably all the colours of the rainbow. So very colourful slayers. And I think that's going to be fun to paint as well. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to painting these. Now, Mr. Remington had some of these Imperial Dwarves with the spears years ago, and he painstakingly painted the spiral pattern on them, but then he sold them, so I don't know if he's going to have the patience to do that again on his. I'm certainly not going to do a spiral stripy pattern on mine, but that sounds like too much work, frankly, and it would be another 10 years before they got on the table if I was attempting something very intricate like that. What am I looking forward to the most? Which model am I most excited for? In terms of having it in my collection, it might be the Goblin Hewer, because it's something I always wanted, but I wasn't really in the hobby at the time that it was around, so I missed out on the Goblin Hewer the first time. I just think it's a really cool concept. And I don't even mind the fact that Slayers are killing things from a distance, because the fact that it's a Goblin Hewer, it's not a Giant or a Dragon Hewer. So a heroic death isn't launching yourself into some goblins and getting a goblin spear between the ribs. I don't look at that as heroic. I think mowing down the goblins with all these axes so that you then have a clear path towards the gigantic troll hag or the giant or the wyvern, I think that is perfectly slayerish behaviour, because that's where you really want to get your heroic death, against the big stuff. So I don't have a problem with them mowing down hordes of goblins with artillery. That's my personal reasoning for it anyway. And look, you even get the goblin that has been hewed as well. Very nice. In terms of changing my army and something that I just want to have in to make cool lists, what do I think is going to be the biggest game changer? Potentially the engineers for the Engineering Expeditionary Force, because that is a drastically different playstyle that you can achieve with that. So that could be quite a big deal. Also, as I said, the King on Shield Bearers is a big game changer as well. The Jankmaster says, justifying wimpy slayers. Well, you could look at it that way, but I think my rationale behind it does hold some water. I think that's perfectly reasonable, as long as you're only firing it at the puny units, like the goblins, so you can get to the big stuff. Then I think it's perfectly fine. Maybe the Slayers all have to draw straws before the battle to decide who actually mans the Goblin Hewer, because you wouldn't want to be the one doing it. You want to be out there seeking your heroic death. And you're not going to be having much of a heroic death if you just as a war machine crew at the back. The pony cart is also a significant game changer. Yes, I'll agree there. And combined with the anvil to give extra movement. Now, if you have 2 anvils, can you use the same bound spell on each one on the same unit? Because that would be interesting, because there's a rune you can take that gives you a pre-game move. So you can move up 3 inches, be in marching column, so you can then make a really big move with the pony cart, and then use the anvil to move again, and then use a second anvil to go even further. Assuming you're in range this whole time. So potentially, you can be incredibly fast with a unit. So if you're making the ultimate Death Star and you just plant it straight in front of the enemy in the first turn, you might need to use gyrocopters to guard the flanks, perhaps. But it's going to be fun to play with all these weird and bizarre new tactics. Ooh, let's see if I can pronounce this name. So, let's go with Seihuk-wei. Let's go with that and hope that's right. Why would you collect 100 years old models? Well, some, like me, firmly believe that the current era is not the golden age of miniature. The golden age, I believe, was the 90s. Some people would say that's heresy and that the 80s was actually the true golden era. And out of this lot, what is from the 90s? Let's see. So, the plastics are not. They're much more recent. The Slayers, I feel like these were the 90s when these guys came out. These Slayers. So, they classify as golden era for me. I think the Bugman's Cart predates the golden era. I think the Doom Seekers and the Goblin Hewer were 2000s, maybe late 2000s. Is there anything else from the 90s? Imperial Dwarves, some of these definitely have 90s about them. I don't know if this guy is maybe 90s. The rest of them, some of them could have been 80s. Maybe this guy, he could be 90s though. I have to double check on that. But things like the mid-era organ gun are my favourite models. So, rounding out the force with some of the more modern stuff and some of the classic stuff that I missed out on, and some of the even older classics that were gone by the time I got into the hobby in the 90s. The bulk of my dwarf army is from the year 2000, which is when they brought in the multi-part plastic dwarves, which are obviously very tasty, which are the ones that predate these ones. These are the later ones. I think these came out, was it late 2000s, these plastic dwarves? So the year 2000 ones, that's the bulk of my army. Most of my war machines are from the 90s. I've got some of the more recent ones as well, but most of them are 90s. My gyrocopter was round about 2000 as well. Let's see, Green Stuff Games we've got in the chat, my co-host from the Recon Table Dead Zone podcast. The early 2000s, yeah, they were a pretty good time. Junkmaster says, I hope they release the Goblobber. That would be very nice. Because they obviously still have all these old classic molds, because they're bringing totally weird things back that you would never expect, like the goddamn Bugman's Pony Cart. So the Goblobber is probably in there somewhere, so I would not be surprised at all if that came back in the future. On the other hand, why would they throw everything in there immediately? Because they've got so much classic stuff that they can sell on nostalgia. If they bring it all out at once, even if they brought it all back now and on the first run of Made to Order, people are going to be holding on to their funds or only picking and choosing what they buy, and then the excitement dies down. If you hold back a few things so that in a few years when you get around to doing the dwarves again, you can at that point say, the most legendary dwarven model, the Goblobber, returns, and then people who have been saving up their money again over these years, only buying vintage dwarves, will suddenly dive all over it and order as many as they can. So I think it could be strategic that they're holding back some of the cool stuff. With the Bretonnian release, they didn't put out the king on the hippogriff, notably. So they're definitely not immediately shoveling everything back into public view. Holding some things back for the future, no doubt. And I assume that the old world is selling well. Look at all this stuff that's sold out. So I think we can hope it's going to be supported for years to come, and that it doesn't get sabotaged by the envious eyes of the Age of Sigmar and 40k teams, who've obviously been working away for years trying to build up a lead over the dead system, which then returns and blasts its way towards the top of the sales charts. I'd be very surprised if it ever overtook 40k. But wouldn't that be amazing if it did? That'd be my dream. Let's have a last look at the chat. Let's see. stand and shoot for units that couldn't shoot. I haven't looked at that yet. I've looked at the fact that war machines can potentially move. You can take thunderers that can move and shoot without penalty. You can put certain engineers and certain characters and units that stop you being punished for shooting at long range. You've got engineers that can kind of booby trap areas of the battlefield, which is really cool. And just looking forward to trying all these things out. It's like a whole new world's opened up, and we'd only just scratched the surface of what was initially available with the Dwarves, because I didn't have access to all the models yet. So the fact that we've now got access to so much more, and 2 totally new army lists with distinct playstyles, the fun never ends. We've got Bad Squiddo in the chat. I'm not going to repeat myself in terms of the total, because I want people to watch the entire stream, not just turn up at the end for the answer. That would be disgraceful. So let me know in the comments, if you're watching this after the fact, how much did you spend on dwarves? What was your dwarven budget? Did the models that popped up meet your expectations? Did you immediately buy them? Was there anything disappointing about the release? Were you able to get Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King of Karak Kedrin? Or, like me, did you try and complete your order after 2 minutes to find that he was sold out? And what would you like to see in the next wave of dwarves? What would you like to see on Made to Order? All of these things and more in the comments. It was significantly more than £20, I can tell you that now. You can't even get a model for £20. Okay, let's wrap this one up. What's next on the channel? Well, there's not going to be a battle report of the old world this week, because obviously I am at home recovering from a knee operation. So probably next week, if it all goes according to plan, I should be up and about and back to full power pretty much by next week. That was the prediction of the doctors. So hopefully that comes true, because I've got more events and I don't want to miss. I've already had to pull out of the Kings of War tournament this weekend because of this. So hopefully I don't have to miss even more action. Speaking of Kings of War, I have got one more Kings of War battle report in the bank ready to roll at some point this week. And when I get my Arcane Journal, which could be this weekend if Element Games send it out early, which their website claims they are going to do, so I'll see whether that comes true. So I'm going to look at that, not only for the rules to just analyse the army list, I'm also going to compare it to all the previous iterations of the Dwarf Army book, because I have all of them. So I'm going to go through them all, comparing the style, the layout, what are they trying to encourage you to feel with the dwarves, what are they trying to evoke, and comparing the photos as well, because the paint styles change a lot over the years, so it'll be interesting to look at that. So you can look forward to all this incredible, juicy, spicy, succulent, tender, moist, finger-licking good, dishlicious content flowing like a tide of deliciousness onto your wargaming taste buds via the internet. And don't forget to check out all the links in the description and subscribe and like and all that good stuff. Also, if you want to fund my next wave of Dwarven purchases, if you want to enable this madness, then kindly pledge your entire life savings to the Patreon or PayPal. And if you can't afford your entire life savings, then maybe consider like remortgaging your house or something. Because what is a more exciting use of that money? You buying like food, or me buying, for example, Ungrim Ironfist and a flame cannon? I think we all know the answer to that. Annie is saying that I can't answer the door. That is true. I'm incapable of answering the door in time for any modern delivery person. The amount of time they spend waiting is not high enough for me to reach the front door at the moment in my current condition. So, yes. And with that, who should we rest on? Should we rest on the sold-out Ungrim Ironfist while I wrap the video up? Because he's evaded my grasp for now, but soon he will be mine. Just not yet. Okay, all that remains to be said at this point is... good night out there. Whatever you are.